filter is snatched, it's cute, but I'm gonna try to do it for real on this side. I'm using the NARS Creamy Concealer in the color Custard, and I'm gonna apply some here and here. Just a little bit goes a long way, but we're gonna get that cat eye effect and lift the eye. I'm also applying some right here to lift and here to cover up any imperfection. And this is buildable, so you can add more if you need to, but look at the coverage alone with just 2 little swipes. Perfect. Blend it here, blend it all through the bottom, and lift up. Contour just a little bit. Who says you need a filter? And now for the grand reveal. With concealer and without. Gorgeous. Once he saw I had money, he asked me out on a date. I had been crushing on him for more than a year, so I said yes. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it was sent to me on Instagram. We set up a date and it went really well. He paid for dinner and congratulated me on all my success. After that, we started hanging out almost every single weekend, and about a month later, he asked me to be his girlfriend, and I was so happy. I had my dream job, I lost weight, I looked damn good. And I got the perfect boyfriend too. But this is when he got toxic. He would start to criticize little things about my body. For example, I had a little bit of fat on my stomach, and he would point that out. Or he would point out that my boobs weren't that big. And like I said in part 1, he was a trainer, so he had abs. It made me feel self-conscious, so I never got undressed in front of him. Then one day he suggested I go to a plastic surgeon. He even looked up a few in my area. Part 3 is
but if I do, then I might miss you, babe. It's complicated and stupid, but my ass squeezed by sexy Cupid. Guess he wants to play, wants to play. I love game, I love game. Hold me and love me, just wanna touch you for a minute. Maybe 3 seconds is enough for my heart to quit. Have some fun, this beat is sick. I wanna take a ride on the disco stick. Don't think too much, just bust that stick. I wanna take a ride on the disco stick. Let's play a love game, play a love game. Do you want love, or you want fame, or you in that game?
Dry skin and dry under eyes are the worst when you want to apply makeup. I love using the Burt's Bees Goodness Glows Miracle Balm. A thin layer of this on any patchy areas is going to help your makeup sit really nicely on the skin. I apply a super thin layer under my eyes, and then I follow it up with concealer like I normally do. It leaves my skin looking dewy, glowy, and crease-free. You can use this balm for so many other things. It's definitely a multitasker. I love using it on my lips and as a blush topper. And if you've ever wondered what makeup artists use for a glossy lid, this is it. Look how gorgeous that looks. I also love applying it to my elbows and my cuticles. And there you have it, perfect hydrated skin underneath the concealer. And remember, the drier the skin, the more likely you are to get wrinkles. So please start taking care of that now. By the way, I got mine at CVS if you're wondering.
This looks crazy, I know. Bear with me for a sec. Wait till the end. I've always wanted to do this. Lol. Lol.
There is a point to this craziness, I swear to God. I'm going to grab some of the Juno cleansing balm, and I'm going to rub it in between my hands, and I want to see how long it takes for me to take this off. Okay, wasn't expecting that. Yep, I'm ready. Spray, spray. That was so quick. No red on my face. Let's just have a moment of silence for the thriving skin. He slapped me straight across the face and I fell to the ground. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. When he saw what he'd done, he started apologizing right away. Then he said that the girl who contacted me on Instagram to warn me about him was just his stalker, and that he had broken up with this girl but she couldn't get over him. At the time, we weren't living together, so I went back to my mom's place. I didn't speak to him for a few days. Then he started coming over to my mom's house every single day with flowers, apologizing and begging me back. Unfortunately, I decided to forgive him. 2 weeks later, he asked me to marry him, and I said yes. I posted a picture of my engagement ring on Instagram, and that's when I got another message from another girl. She told me that my boyfriend was abusive and that she also had to get a restraining order. I didn't know who to believe. I went to my mother-in-law's house and I asked her what had happened, and she basically told me that he has issues with his temper. I asked her if what the girl said was true, and she said it wasn't her business to say. A few weeks later, we got married, and that's when the real torture started. He became super controlling and mean, and when I wouldn't do something he wanted, would lock me in my room for hours. Part 3. My husband would lock me in the bedroom for hours. But then it got worse. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. It got to the point that whenever he would get mad, he would either push me, shake me, or slap me. This went on for a year, but I always hoped that he would just change. After 2 years, I decided to get in contact with the women who said they got restraining orders against my husband. Met up with both of them at a cafe to lie to my husband and say that I was going to be late at work. They brought all their receipts. They had pictures and text messages, emails, and police reports. Couldn't believe it. I mean, I could, but at the same time I couldn't, you know? If I had just paid attention to these girls before we got married, none of this would have happened. But these girls knew exactly what I was going through. So we hatched a plan of how I would escape my abusive husband. At this point, he controlled everything, my cell phone and my bank account. By the way, I hadn't told my mom anything at this point. When I asked her for money and I told her why, she was shocked. The plan would be that I was going to escape at night. I waited for Friday because I knew he'd go out with his friends to drink. I called an Uber, but a few minutes later, my husband shows up at our door. Part 4 is up. The night I was planning to escape my abusive husband, I called an Uber to the house, but my husband showed up 2 minutes later. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. As soon as he walks in through the door, he was totally drunk. That's when he told me that he was hungry. I pretended that everything was normal and that I didn't have an Uber coming to save me. I went to the kitchen, I made him a sandwich as quickly as I could. I came back out, took one bite, and started falling asleep. Thank God. I hid in my backpack behind a curtain, slowly grabbed the backpack and my shoes, and that's when my cell phone notified me that the Uber was there. I was terrorized at this point because I was hoping the noise from the cell phone didn't wake him up. I turned around, but he was totally passed out. I ran barefoot to the Uber, got in, and told him to drive away. I went straight to a friend's house and turned off my phone. Next day, I went straight to a lawyer to file for divorce. I had text messages and pictures. I also went to the police and they said that I can't file a restraining order yet. My husband, of course, is already looking for me. He went to my mom's house, but she didn't let him in. But here's the problem. I already miss him. He sent me an email apologizing, swearing that it won't happen again. My gut's telling me not to go back. What do you guys think? How would you guys feel about going on a trip with me? Like actually hanging out together, face to face. I want to meet you guys so bad, so I want to host a trip where I get to travel with 20 of you. But first, we have to figure out where we want to go. Click the link in my bio that says survey. Fill out all the information so we can figure out where you want to go and how long you want to stay, all of that. Wouldn't it be so fun if we got to hang out together, travel somewhere exotic, make smoothies, and just talk? Go fill out the survey right now. Spots are limited. Day 3 of my 7 days of giveaway. I'm gonna choose 5 people from the comments to win a private makeup class with me on Zoom. All you have to do is follow me on Instagram and tag a friend in the comments. Make sure to also comment your Instagram handle so that I can see if you're following me. This is gonna be a super fun session. You guys can ask me questions, we can hang out, and I'll teach you some makeup. Also, the winners for my last giveaway are in the caption so that everyone knows who won. Summer no makeup look, yes. Amazing Cosmetics just dropped their Illuminate Primer Highlighter in the color rose and I'm obsessed. I'm applying it over my SPF, of course. I wear this without foundation and look at my skin. Beautiful. But because this is a no makeup look, I am applying foundation. But I'm skipping the concealer and using the rose highlighter instead. This reflects the light, so it actually makes me look like I'm wearing concealer without it. I really don't like concealer during the summer. I apply it to my cheeks, the nose, and the bridge. I also use it on my lids to brighten the skin. And if you're in a rush, just mix it in with your SPF. Don't tell me it looks like I'm wearing makeup because I know it doesn't. Yay! Story time about how I came out as gay to my husband. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. I'm 27 years old, and when I was in high school, I knew that I like girls. In fact, I pretty much only dated girls throughout all of my high school. I did also date guys. My parents were totally accepting of this, by the way. Growing up, I always knew that I wanted to marry a man so that I could have kids. When I got into college, I started dating this girl. Her and I dated for a couple of weeks, and she introduced me to my now husband. So he and I started hooking up behind her back, and she eventually found out and she broke up with me. Fast forward a few years later, and we're married. But here's the problem. I found myself only being attracted to women, and I was definitely not attracted to my husband. Obviously, this became a huge problem in the relationship. So guess what my husband did? He hired an escort to come spend some time with us, if you know what I mean. This was great, but I basically only wanted to be with the escort, not my husband. A few weeks later, the escort and I actually started dating. So bad, I know. My husband had no idea. And this escort actually asked me to be her girlfriend. Part 2 is up. So the escort and I started dating behind my husband's back. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. Like, her and I were in a full-blown relationship. Mind you, I'm a woman. Mind you, my husband doesn't know that I like women only. This went on for a few months. I was living a total lie. My husband would go to work. Since I worked from home, I would go to my escort girlfriend's apartment and spend the day with her. I even took a toothbrush and some clothes. One day, my girlfriend and I decided to go watch a movie. We're standing in line to buy popcorn, and of course, we're kissing and holding hands. This is when one of my husband's employees comes up to me, taps my shoulder, and says hi. But she acted like she didn't see anything. Like she was just coming up to me and saying hi. I could tell that something was off. I mean, she saw me kissing this girl. That's when the guilt started getting to me. I could no longer lie to my husband. I knew I had to come out to him. That same night, I talked to my husband. I confessed everything and told him that I really liked women only. That's when he tells me that he knew about the relationship this whole time. That he knew I only liked women. Part 3 is up. My husband tells me that he knew I was having an affair this whole time. That he also knew that I only liked women. Claiming this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. That's when my husband tells me that it's okay. Because he can deal with me having this affair. Because he didn't want anyone to know that he was married to someone that liked women. He told me he'd rather stay married, have kids with me, and basically live a lie. I also forgot to mention my husband's a really wealthy guy. He offered me a lot of money to stay with him and have kids. Last week, I got a letter from his lawyer. It was a contract basically saying that if I stay with him and have his kids, he'll pay me a very large amount of money. But here's the thing. I've fallen in love with my escort girlfriend. She thinks I'm going to divorce my husband to be with her. My husband thinks that I'm going to sign this contract and have his kids. Even my mother-in-law is getting involved. She's begging me to sign the contract and have the kids. Never thought I'd have to choose between love and money. A few days ago, my escort girlfriend actually asked me to move in with her. I told my husband, he said no. What should I do? Dry skin and dry under eyes are the worst when you want to apply makeup. I love using the Burt's Bees Goodness Glows Miracle Balm. A thin layer of this on any patchy areas is going to help your makeup sit really nicely on the skin. I apply a super thin layer under my eyes and then I follow it up with concealer like I normally do. It leaves my skin looking dewy, glowy, and crease-free. You can use this balm for so many other things. It's definitely a multitasker. I love using it on my lips and as a blush topper. And if you've ever wondered what makeup artists use for a glossy lid, this is it. Look how gorgeous that looks. I also love applying it to my elbows and my cuticles. And there you have it, perfect hydrated skin underneath the concealer. And remember, the drier the skin, the more likely you are to get wrinkles. So please start taking care of that now. By the way, I got mine at CVS if you're wondering. I'm planning my own beauty travel trip. You guys will get to travel with me and get to know me, and we're gonna do so many fun activities. We could go to Greece or Italy or Bali. The entire trip will be centered around beauty, health, and fitness. You guys know I love my detox smoothie, so I'm gonna show you all of that. And I am a holistic nutritionist, so I'll be talking to you about health and tons of fun stuff together. So if you want to travel with me, click the link in my bio, fill out the form. Super easy, takes 30 seconds. That way I can start planning the trip and we can get to know each other quick. Story time about how I tricked my ex into paying for all of my plastic surgery. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I repeat, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. A little backstory. I met my ex at the gym. He was actually my personal trainer. He was in really good shape while I was definitely out of shape and pudgy. He motivated me to work out and lose weight. I quickly realized I had a major crush on him. So after a full year of training, I had lost about 30 pounds. I felt really good about myself. So I mustered up the courage to tell him that I had a crush on him. But unfortunately, he told me that he never dated clients. Then he said that we still had a lot of work to do on my body anyway. It was a punch to the gut. I decided I needed to get a new trainer because of what he said and because obviously I had a crush on him. Well, it just so happens that I landed in my dream job. I started making a lot of money. He followed me on Instagram and he started noticing it. I moved into a better apartment and I got a new car. I also got lip filler and cheek filler. That's when he calls me up and asked me on a date. I said yes right away. You'll never guess what happened next. Part 2 is up. Once he saw I had money, he asked me out on a date. I had been crushing on him for more than a year, so I said yes. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. We set up a date and it went really well. He paid for dinner and congratulated me on all my success. After that, we started hanging out almost every single weekend. And about a month later, he asked me to be his girlfriend and I was so happy. I had my dream job, I lost weight, I looked damn good. And I got the perfect boyfriend too. But this is when he got toxic. He would start to criticize little things about my body. For example, I had a little bit of fat on my stomach and he would point that out. Or he would point out that my boobs weren't that big. And like I said in part 1, he was a trainer, so he had abs. It made me feel self-conscious, so I never got undressed in front of him. Then one day he suggested I go to a plastic surgeon. He even looked up a few in my area. Part 3 is my boyfriend actually suggested I go to a plastic surgeon because he didn't like that my boobs were small and that I had a bit of a tummy. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. I got extremely offended, of course. Then he acted like what he said was completely normal. I told him that I love my body as it was. Then he said that I still needed to do a lot of work on it. Then he insinuated that his girlfriend needs to look just as good as he does. In other words, he thought he was better looking than me. So I thought to myself, okay, sure. Let's go to this plastic surgeon. But I was gonna find a way to make him pay for it. You see, at this point I was paying for a lot. I would pay for our dates and dinners, and he would even sometimes ask me for gas money. We went to the plastic surgeon and I decided to get my boobies done. So I told my boyfriend that all my money was tied up in investments, that I needed him to loan me the money. He said, yeah, sure, and he transferred the money. I got the plastic surgery and it looks amazing. I've since moved to another city, blocked him on my phone and on social media, and he hasn't been able to find me. I mean, I think he kind of deserved it, but I also feel guilty. What should I do? About how my dad shot my abusive husband. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. My husband and I met through some friends, but I never thought he was attractive or even interesting. But then I heard from other people that he would comment about how beautiful I was, and that's when he started asking me out. I kept saying no because I just didn't like him. But then he reached out to my cousin and asked her to convince me to go out with him. My cousin and I are super close and I always trusted her judgment. So I finally said yes to one date. I was in nursing school at the time, so I was really busy and actually really broke. So he paid for dinner and he even offered to help me pay my bills. I couldn't believe he was being so generous, but obviously at the time I didn't realize that he was just trying to control me. Here's where it gets really scary. 2 months later, he actually took me out on a date. And it was our wedding. That's right, he planned a whole wedding, got my parents' permission and everything. I show up to this date thinking we were gonna have dinner, but then he put me in a freaking wedding gown. I felt like I had no other choice, so I said yes. 2 weeks after we got married, he completely changed. He was totally abusive. He started brainwashing me to not even see my family. Part 2 is up. After my husband forced me into marrying him, he became a totally different person. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. He started brainwashing me into believing that I could never leave him, that no one could ever love me, and he even started convincing me that my family hated me. It was just his way to keep me away from them. But my entire family had enough, especially my dad. My dad was a cop and he had dealt with a lot of abusive husbands in the past. So one night my dad comes to our very big, very beautiful house and he asked my husband to let me go. That's when my husband grabs a bat from behind the door and starts swinging at my dad. My dad, being a cop, had his gun on him. He pulled it out and shot him in the you-know-what. That's when he looked at me and said that he would kill me if I left. Part 3 is up. My dad pulls his gun out and shoots my husband in the you-know-what. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. My husband falls to the ground, looks at me and says that if I leave the house, he would kill me. But of course, I ran straight to my dad and we went home. My dad called an ambulance and they went to get my husband. He was in the hospital for 3 weeks. I never went to visit him once. I was so grateful to my dad for getting me out of that abusive relationship. But guess what? The abuse hasn't ended. My husband is suing me for abandonment. He's got his lawyers visiting me every single day, harassing me. I've noticed one man who keeps following me, and my car was broken into 2 nights ago. There's so much more. I think I'll have to make a follow-up story time. My dad is doing everything possible to get the divorce, and we're also trying to get a restraining order against my husband. I actually recently found pictures that I had taken of my bruises, so now I've got proof. Should I do a part 4? Part 2 about how I got caught hooking up with my stepson. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. So like I said, my husband was always traveling for work. So my stepson and I would be alone in the house a lot. One night we were watching a movie and it just happened. After that, we couldn't get enough of each other. He even started skipping class so that he could spend more time with me. We basically turned into boyfriend and girlfriend when my husband wasn't there. When my husband would come home from his work trips, we would pretend like everything was normal. One day after my husband got back from one of his work trips, he found one of his son's socks in our bed. He asked me how it got there, but I told him it probably got stuck in there while I was washing the sheets. A few months passed by and my stepson and I are still hooking up. This is when I realized that I hadn't gotten my period in a few months. My period was always irregular, so I didn't think anything of it. My stepson went to the pharmacy to get me a pregnancy test. It came out positive. But the big problem is that my husband can't have children anymore. How was I going to explain this to my husband when he couldn't have kids? Part 3 is up. Part 3 about how I got caught hooking up with my stepson. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. My stepson and I take the pregnancy test and it turns out it was positive. Well, I told my stepson that his dad wasn't able to have kids anymore. That's when he really flipped out. Then he tells me we should just tell his dad the truth. I told him let's not do anything until we actually confirm that I'm pregnant. We go to the doctor the next day and it turns out I'm not pregnant. But this made me realize that we needed needed to end the affair. Once we got home, I told him we needed to break things off. He begged me not to, and we went to his bedroom. Not even 2 minutes later, his mother walks in. She catches us on his bed. She nearly has a heart attack, calls his dad and tells him everything. She took him out of the house and told me never to see him again. When my husband came back from his trip, he made me promise not to see my stepson again. I told him we should get a divorce, but he said no. Then he confessed to me that he's been having an affair too. Now he doesn't even let me leave the house anymore. I want a divorce. What should I do? Story time about how I got caught hooking up with my stepson. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. My husband actually cheated on his wife with me. I started working at his company when I was 18. We started an affair and I knew it was wrong, but at the time I was very broke. He offered me a wealthy lifestyle and believe it or not, we fell in love. So when he and I got married, I was still 18. He was much older than me. He was 42. Everyone in town, of course, started hating me because I broke up the family. His wife couldn't even see my face. My husband already had 2 kids when we got married. One was 12, one was 15. So they were much closer in age to me than he was. The kids and I got along super well. I was their cool stepmom and we had a lot of fun. When I turned 20, the oldest boy came to live with us. And I think you already know what happens. My husband was always traveling for work. That means my stepson and I would be home alone most of the time. One night we decided to watch a movie, and before I knew it, we were making out on the couch. From then, we basically started an affair behind my husband's back. Part 2 is up. Get ready with me for 3 auditions. Let's go. I'm starting with my I Do Care Vitamin C spray. Super Goop SPF, because even though I'm home, you should still put on SPF. My makeup has to look super natural, so I'm using a concealer that matches my skin tone and then one that's brighter, and I put it just like that. And now we blend. For brows, I'm using ColourPop Brow Boss, and I did brush my brows with soap. For blush, I'm using Flower Tender from ColourPop, and for most auditions, I always do this makeup look super natural. For lips, I'm using Kosas in the color Greatness, I think, or maybe the color Pulse. Using a little bit of Joe mascara because the rest of the look is so natural. I need to play up my eye. That's it for the makeup look. My hair is simple, 2 pigtails and a pink little sweater, which looks cute on camera. And wish me good luck. I have to do 3 auditions plus 2 singing auditions, so I better get to it. Love you guys.
You know a budding ain't a bust. You are the only way to trust ya. It's only fair it burns up in that rust. Lay down my thumb, lay down a holy banner flag. Hold down my thumb, help is surely on its way. Don't bask in the glory of mine, and I know they can't come take that heart away. Bask in the glory of mine.
We vibe into a different height. Your hands touching my scars, body's shaking hard. I believe I can fly. Da-dee-da-da-da, with you by my side. I believe I can fly. Da-dee-da-da-da, you make me go so high. I believe I can fly.
husband would lock me in the bedroom for hours. But then it got worse. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. It got to the point that whenever he would get mad, he would either push me, shake me, or slap me. This went on for a year, but I always hoped that he would just change. After 2 years, I decided to get in contact with the women who said they got restraining orders against my husband. Met up with both of them at a cafe to lie to my husband and say that I was going to be late at work. They brought all their receipts. They had pictures and text messages, emails, and police reports. Couldn't believe it. I mean, I could, but at the same time I couldn't, you know? If I had just paid attention to these girls before we got married, none of this would have happened. But these girls knew exactly what I was going through. So we hatched a plan of how I would escape my abusive husband. At this point, he controlled everything, my cell phone and my bank account. By the way, I hadn't told my mom anything at this point. When I asked her for money and I told her why, she was shocked. The plan would be that I was going to escape at night. I waited for Friday because I knew he'd go out with his friends to drink. I called an Uber, but a few minutes later, my husband shows up at our door. Part 4 is up.